I'm doing a book review, an honest book review about Freakonomics, and the purpose of its data mining, and it's the fact that this book helps you and ask questions you normally never wanted to ask, like why is the sky blue, or what is the point of living? There's a lot of things. That last one was a bit dark, but Freakonomics actually takes place. Uh, well, actually released its first book in 2005, 5 years after I was born. This book revolved around one certain topic: crime in the United States. From the early 1960s to the early 2000s, for 4 decades, crime has been higher than it's ever been before, and a lot of people know it. It's common knowledge. But what they don't ask is why crime fell. Because after the year 2000, after 1988, when certain things were made legal, crime dropped seriously fast. Now, expert criminologists said that crime was going to keep rising and rising and rising. Instead, it just fell. It fell. Oh my god. The reason why is due to Freakonomics' data mining, and it only became apparent like a few years later, like maybe a decade later, 2015. As of right now, this video is in 2019, so this book took a lot of years to actually develop for other readers to actually realize what this meant. And people who actually voice their opinions already been a little too late. But it's true. Crime was said to rise higher than it's ever been. Teenage murders left and right, violent homicide, assault, rape, everything was just going up in the late 1960s. And after 1988, when abortion was illegal, bear that in mind, crime rate dropped. Now, a lot of you may be wondering, why did crime rate drop because of abortion? Well, there's a lot of good reasons for that. For one, before 1988, abortion was considered illegal in many states of America. Even in very few states actually allowed it, like New York, Chicago, other places. Tennessee, maybe? No, not Tennessee. Never mind. Those places were allowed to legalize abortion. Very few places. Whereas the rest of the country, abortion was considered illegal. So many women ended up having children they didn't want to have, whether they were unmarried or poor or still a teenager, and maybe sometimes all three. Because of that, they ended up having a child they were unfit and unprepared for. They ended up either giving these children up for adoption, or they were forced to raise them in the household they knew how, in a very broken environment, in a very dark environment. These women then tend to resent their children. They end up showing that child nothing but hate, bitter resentments, bad emotions, negative things. Everything that would give any would-be criminal reason to hate the world. And that might have been why crime had been so high recently. Because of illegal abortions, women couldn't actually reverse the pregnancy order. They couldn't just give up the baby in the fetal form. And because of that, they ended up raising children that were unfit and not ready to be in this world, because the mother was incapable of taking care of it. And that probably led to the highest rise in crime ever. After legalized abortions were made, crime rates dropped because of fewer women who did not want to have a child in the early stages for the three reasons I mentioned, went through with the abortion instead. And 1 in every 4 women who got an aborted, the other 4 are given live births, which means crime rate just kept falling and falling and falling because children who would have grown up in an unstable and broken environment never happened. It just didn't. But there are still a lot of other questions as to why crime kept falling, and abortion was one key factor. This book actually tells you about the different layers of every topic. It shows you one side of the layer, and then it shows you the hidden side of everything. For instance, cheating in sports. That's something you think of when you watch a football game or like a baseball match or something like sumo wrestlers, which is a bit specific, but I'll get to that in a bit. You can understand why athletes cheat to win, because they want so badly to win, for glory, for fame, for wealth. That's why. But if you're cheating to lose, you'd be consigning yourself to a real ring of sporting hell, not likely to ever crawl out of it ever again. For instance, a fun little nugget for casual baseball fans out there, and I just recently found out about this thanks to this book. But the White Sox, which is a different name compared to the Red Sox you're used to, or you Yankees. The White Sox were conspiring with gamblers to throw the World Series, which you already know what that is. And because of that, they were consigned and renamed as the Black Sox. They then kept falling in sporting history until completely wiped off, only remembered as a black mark. Other boxers even, they tend to resign early in their early careers because they chose to take a dive to get extra money or because they were gambling. Take a dive in a match, you get your money's worth. If you win that match, then, well, that depends on the bets. Because of that, cheating is always happening. Let's take this up another notch. Let's see sumo wrestlers. Now, when you think of sumo wrestlers, you immediately imagine big fat men wearing nothing but a very weird looking type of thong. No. Well, true, actually. But they actually, these big men end up wrestling in the matches that are held twice a year, 15 days in consecutive match order. For these sumo wrestlers, there is like a giant pyramid. Like, imagine a giant pyramid where the top elite wrestlers, which is right here, and the bottom wrestlers, who are not the elite. Now, to sumo wrestling, rank is everything. Because every rank grants that sumo wrestler a slice of how much freedom they're entitled to get. If they're in the top 50s, they are entitled to get like $500,000 in yearly wages. They get as much food as they like. They basically become kings, royal kings in their own rights. In the top 40s, you could get over $750,000 a year for every match and for maintaining your rank. For your rank decides how much money you make, what type of food you can eat, how free you really are. In the top 10%, you are treated like royalty. But that's top 50. If you go any lower than that, then you tend to have to take care of the higher ranks. You have to give them their food, you have to bathe them in some very difficult spots, you even have to clean their rooms and everything else. To them, rank is everything, so you can understand why they would want to cheat on such a massive scale. Actually getting down to the cheating involved, it would take about an hour to explain how they cheat. And you can only find out after you read Freakonomics or after making some very extensive research. For research is hard to come across, but it also, at the same time, very easy. As long as you're committed to the task, to ask the questions, not only will you be able to get the motivation to find the answer, but you'd also want to keep going, to keep expanding your mind, to keep understanding how the world works, and to learn why the people do the things that they do. This book revolved around the crime rates in America. For 40 years, there was endless amounts of crime in sight. And one of the main reasons why there was so much crime was because of crack. Now, you know what crack is. I'm not going to insult your intelligence as to what it is, but if you want to know what it is, just type in crack dope or something. I don't care. But the main reason is because of that. Drug dealers on the streets, be it black or white, always dealt in side corners, and sometimes they give either pure heroin, cocaine, or crack, which is apparently very cheap. And not only is it very cheap, but it's also easy to get. And because of that, they just charge it a few dollars, and customers are always out buying for more. Not only that, but because crack is so easy to come by, there have been way too many drug overdoses too. Not just that, but drug dealers who are dealing on one turf and are invaded by another, they always end with 2 or 3 drug dealers dead from a gunfight, which is another key factor. Loose gun laws. Anyone in America at the time could have gotten a gun, a handgun, an assault rifle, anything, for such a small price, and that's because of black markets. If you were to enforce gun laws, it would be pointless, not unless you were willing to take drastic steps and measures to make sure that only very specific people got these guns, like army soldiers or people who are legitimately licensed to carry a gun. Not just some random kid out in the streets who think they can rule the world with that one pistol. Because holding a gun is basically a weapon to instantly kill a human being or completely cripple their future. That is what a gun is. It can be used as a tool, a weapon, or anything you want it to be. And because of that, it's why so many teenage murders occurred in America during that time period. Because people were killing each other left and right because of all the hatred and the animosity. There's so much contempt in the air that people would just pull the trigger just to make themselves feel good. On top of that, because of the crime wave, everyone all thought that they could do crime and get away with it. Because another key factor about why crime kept rising was because there's no punishment for your crimes. Like, you could rob a bank, you get thrown in prison, you're back out in 6 months because the government didn't enforce huge crime any more like criminal policies. They didn't enforce any more punishments on said criminals until there were enough deaths, until there were more than enough people complaining to enforce these policies, so that these criminals are caught, so that they are punished, so that they are thrown in jail. It was only until then that the government actually decided to make more prisons and throw these people in jail for much harsher sentences. You're dealing drugs, 10 to 15 years in prison. You assault someone, 5 to 6 years in prison. Or something like that, I'm not sure. But that's the case. This actually shows you how the mind works. It helps you ask the right questions. And not just that, it has a lot of information that you can use in your daily life. Take incentives, for example. Incentives is something that you use to actually persuade yourself to commit. For instance, your incentive to playing a video game most likely when you're so close to leveling up, but you hold off on doing that. Why? Because that next level up will allow you to reset all of your energy, or it will also reset, it will give you some money, but you're saving up for a discount or something else, which is why you're holding off. That is an economic incentive. You want to get the most value out of what you're doing, out of that next level. Or take a real estate agent, another economic incentive. When you're hiring a real estate agent to sell your house, he or she then goes around to make sure that that house is in good condition. Then she writes up the drafts, she writes the ad, and then she tries to sell it to potential buyers. And you can get a lot of money for more than what you originally thought that was worth. Because that real estate agent is willing to help you and pocket a fair bit of money themselves. Once they get a good deal, they'll have enough money in the bank you will have enough money in the bank to pay for that real estate agent's fees. That's an economic incentive. Because you want that person to sell that house for as much as it is worth. But the real estate agent also has their own incentives or their own self-interest. For instance, if they got a good deal, these real estate agents would be able to pocket maybe 18 grand for selling a house worth of 300 grand, which is a lot more than you're thinking. But if they were trying to give that that owner a better deal, you could crank it to like 10 grand more. But it could take a number of days, and for every day that passes, the amount of money that real estate agent pockets lowers and lowers and lowers until we can secure a second deal. The amount of money they could make is less than 100. Because of that, they're not morally inclined to actually help you and more inclined to help themselves for the right price. Because of that, they always jump on the first deal and make that buyer, either the buyer, pay for more or for less, depending on those real estate agents' incentives. Those are economic incentives. Moral incentives, on the other hand, it basically influences what you do as a moral human being. For instance, if you had the option to save a girl from a bridge or just keep on walking, you would be morally incentivized to actually help the girl instead of just walking by like any other person. If a girl was about to fall to her death off of a bridge, lots of people would crowd around, but none of them would do anything because they don't know how it would impact them. It's the fear of messing up that is a powerful negative incentive. The negative incentive for people who don't want to blunder in front of a whole crowd. No one wants to do that, and people would often be afraid, except for very few people who are courageous enough to do that, because they are socially, morally incentivized to actually help these people in need. Fear is one of the strongest incentives out there. Well, one of them. The rest is love and hate and anger and happiness and other things. But fear is one of the main reasons why incentives are so heavily used. Take real estate agents. Now, I know that's, I've already mentioned this, but real estate agents tend to play to their employers' advantage, their fears, everything. Now, I already mentioned that if they wanted to, they could easily get a better deal, but they pocket less cash. What if I told you that they also use the fear tactics against them, so that they could target one potential buyer, tell them to hold off on the deal, and then target said seller who is selling the house, and have him drop the pricing a bit more? Wouldn't make sense to you, right? But there's a reason for that. After all, every real estate agent tends to get a different price based on who they're selling it to. For instance, if you were charging $6,000 to pay in payment to a real estate agent, they wouldn't exactly take it. They wouldn't exactly jump on that chance because they would want more money out of it. If they managed to sell the pricing for maybe $450,000, then the customer who would be approaching this buy would make that demand. Instead, the real estate agent would explain the situation, call the buyer, explain the situation first, and then convince the seller to drop the prices by explaining a bunch of deep faults that could occur later on. She's playing to that seller's fears because she doesn't want. She wants to get a better cut instead of a smaller one that she was originally entitled to. By dropping the price, the seller is eventually able to sell the house and then leave more money to the real estate agent, which I know doesn't exactly make sense, but it's what happens. Real estate agents will play to your fears. They're experts, of course. They are. All experts across the world can play to your fears. Doctors, for instance, they could prescribe you a medication you don't even need. For instance, if you had like a busted kneecap or after experiencing a bad car crash, you have an immobilized back, they could just simply advise you that you just take these painkillers or you go do this sort of psychotherapy or this physiotherapy and you'll just be fine. No. Some doctors, more than most, will prescribe you to take a type of prescribed drug, which may or may not be easy to take, or something you could get addicted on. Or they could prescribe you unneeded surgeries because you could just fix yourself with some therapy, physical, or just try and maintain a healthier lifestyle, and some painkillers in case the pain gets too bad. Nothing serious. Not like OxyContin, not like fentanyl, not like things like that. They don't have to, but instead they do it so that they can pocket a greater payday. They do it so that they can have more customers come in, and so they can keep getting money from that. That's what they would do. That's what most doctors have done. Not all, but some. Because of that, experts around the world, they can tell you what to do because they can use your fears, like the worst case scenario. They can bring it to mind. And then they can tell it to you. Then they can tell you different scenarios that could go down. Best case scenario, if you heed their advice. Worst case scenario, if you don't. That's how they play to your advantages. And that's why fear is such a powerful incentive. Fear is also why so much crime is running around, because people were afraid. They were afraid to actually be law-abiding citizens. They were afraid of being shot in the dead of night. They were afraid of being assaulted. They were afraid of being mugged. They were afraid of being shot or killed or any other reason, which is why everyone fought violence with violence. And that is just one of the key. These are all key factors as to why crime kept rising and rising and rising in America. Now, I've just been talking about crime and abortion laws, crack, and, of course, the fear of incentives. But I haven't exactly gone into the deeper part of it as to why Freakonomics is such a good read. Because it starts with a bunch of outrageous questions. For instance, one of the outrageous questions I just recently read in this book was, if you could choose between a baby and a fetus, which would you choose? Which would you find of more value? Which in reality is a really outrageous question, but if you really dive down into the statistics, if you actually sought data or used your beliefs to answer the question, you'd believe that there are a lot of answers to that, not just one. For instance, why is the sky blue, or why do plants have such green leaves, for anyone who's unsuspecting? There are a lot of answers you could get from that, and none of them are the right one unless you actually get data from this. Freakonomics helps you expand your knowledge and your actual base learning instinct. You want to expand your knowledge so that you can actually seem more intellectual, or because you just simply want to understand laws of how the way the world works. That's what you'd want to do. You'd also want to learn more about how different topics have a darker side to everything. Like what drugs do, that's obvious. There's the legal side and the legal side. There's the good and the bad. Or if you were to look at building industries or deforestation, you could look at the good and the bad. Less of the good, but more of the bad. You could look at a number of things, such as the video game industry, or you could also look at how elections go around. You could look at a number of things. And because of that, Freakonomics encourages you to keep expanding your mind. Doesn't matter how dumb the question is. If you have the guts to look for the answer, go for it. That's what this book actually tells you. You can also listen to some experts, or you could go and seek help from professionals. They can give you a good idea. Or if you just want to do this at home, you can always get up on the computer and find and let the computer be the expert you want it to be. Because as of right now, experts have less and less opportunity to actually show customers what they can do, and less opportunity to incentivize them to listen to them, because computers prevent them from actually making an impact. Computers make sure you actually get the right information, because Wikipedia, you can get a lot of knowledge from that. Or if you were to just Google the information, like what's the actual cost of a spinal surgery, or what's the cost of selling your house. You take a picture of it, you put it on the internet, and you actually search through it. Or if you actually took the details of the house right down to the very last detail, to the last number or square foot, you could get how much that house could be actually worth, instead of going to that real estate agent. It can be worth a lot more than what that real estate agent is actually selling it for. But then you have to make your own moral decisions as to whether or not you will listen to the computer, or to the doctor, or the real estate agent who is in charge of different aspects of your life, different responsibilities. I think that's what I love about Freakonomics. I just recently started getting into it, but I just want to keep learning. I want to keep understanding. And many of you who read this would want to try it out too. So I'm going to tell you this right now. If you have Spotify, write down Freakonomics. And do not add any spaces. There's no spaces in that. There's a podcast that happens around every other time. And they give you quizzes to actually quiz you on how much you've learned during the previous podcasts. Just go on Freakonomics podcast and you'll hear what you want to hear. This week they're talking about the value of your name and whether it has any lasting value or not. For instance, my name is Tahir, which in Arabic means your name is pure. And because Muslims name themselves after certain Arabic words, you tend to hear when a Muslim addresses themselves, they are basically addressing themselves as one of the words in Arabic. My brother's name is Morningstar, if you can believe it. I don't know what my parents' names are, though, at least what they mean. But that's just how it is. And I learned a lot of things. This book I've only mentioned just a sliver of what you can learn from this. This author, Stephen Levy, spoke about the Ku Klux Klan. He talked about how abortion had been legalized and how big of an impact it had made on the crime in America. He talked about the teaching of students and sumo wrestlers and how they're correlated, how they're the same. It shows them that they both cheat. I could explain why teachers cheat, but that would make this video a little too long. But if you've read about charter schools or public schools, you've heard that a lot of teachers have been fired for a teacher cheating. And the reason why is because these teachers tend to fudge the results of their students. Before they hand in the tests to the directors, to the board of directors, or for anyone else higher up who grade these tests, their annual tests, these students who are below than average and score below average, these teachers are pulled into questioning, suspended, put on probation, or fired. And thus they are also given a black mark on the record. But if you are allowed to those students were managed to get a higher score, like if they manage to get a good score, then that teacher gets a higher individual bonus, or they get a promotion, things like that. So these teachers are incentivized to either keep their jobs by fudging the results or gain a bigger paycheck just from doing such a thing. And a teacher's cheating is often hard to find unless you find the data that provides the cause and how to find those teachers who are in fact cheating. This book explains it. It explains a lot of things. It explains how human behavior can often change at the drop of a hat. It shows how emotions can also be changed like the sea, like a rising tide or a gentle movement. This book has a lot of knowledge, and it's worth actually looking into because it helps you expand your mind. And that's a key issue here. That's what I want to explain to you. It helps you ask the questions you want answers to. That's probably the main reason why people want to ask these questions, but they're afraid to because they're afraid of looking like idiots. They're afraid of being viewed as visibly stupid. Honestly, I was afraid of being visibly stupid. I couldn't ask questions as much as I wanted to, and honestly, if I did, then I wouldn't exactly get the response I was looking for. Unless you actually take the step to get your answers, well, none of it ever happened. So I guess that's what Freakonomics is about. It encourages you to ask the questions you want to ask, and it also allows you to expand your mind, to allow your mind to be more thirsty for knowledge and to keep searching for more. That's what I've learned from this. Honestly, I've been a fan of criminology. I've loved the courtroom system. I've loved how policing is. But as of recent years, after all the corruption I've read about, I'm starting to lose a bit of hope. Freakonomics is also helping me understand just how much knowledge I can stand to gain from learning about topics like that. And that's what I've been doing recently. But I guess that's all I have right now. If you want, I can do a review on each and every single chapter. Or you can check out my blog post where I talk about every chapter and mention the key points. If I ever do. But most likely I will do a vlog about each and every chapter. For one, Chapter 1, the hidden side of everything. Chapter 2, the difference and what are the similarities between the school teacher and the sumo wrestler. Chapter 3, why are the Ku Klux Klan like real estate agents? Now, do not judge me for that. That is in the book. That is a chapter. 4, why do criminals live with their mothers? I know that's an outrageous question. 5, where have all the criminals gone? 6, what makes a good parent? The perfect parent. 7, what does it take to be the perfect parent? There's 7 chapters, maybe more, but the reason why it's so small is because there's so much information packed into each chapter that it honestly seems like very little compared to what you're actually reading, which is a lot longer than you think. There's also a lot more information than you'd like to glean from this. But it's necessary if you want to digest what you're reading. Levi has made plenty of small stories. And because of that, he's able to help you digest the information as to how you, to the questions that are then asked in this book, then written out in ink or by printer. Because of that, you're getting the information you want to digest, not because you can. It helps prepare the mind in order to understand, to digest, to make sense of all the questions that have been asked in this book. And once you get more information, or the hidden side of everything, once you understand that, then asking the questions will come easy to you. I believe that's all the time I have here.